Okay. It's been a while since I put up a video, and as you can see, I am literally sitting in bed right now, about to go to bed, about to go to sleep. But I wanted to make this quick little video, hopefully it's not too long, introducing you to a book I just finished called Fear of Life by Alexander Lowen. So this book was pretty profound for me. It articulates a lot about what I've been trying to talk about here in these videos, which is the relationship between the body and the mind, and the emotions, and how the emotions get structured into the body over time, starting as a baby. And then how that structure, that physical structure, the way that you're shaped by your emotions, affects how you see yourself and affects how you relate to the world and relate to yourself and relate to other people. So basically the main thrust of this book, right, it's Fear of Life. Here's the cover. The main thrust of this book is to explore the nature of the neurotic individual. So the author does this by examining a handful of topics, but the main ones are the Oedipus complex, sexual repression, and how the emotions are stored in the body, like I just mentioned. So there's a really good summary, I think, of the grand theme of this book in the first couple of pages. So I'll read it to you here. We want to be more alive and feel more, but we are afraid of it. Our fear of life is seen in the way we keep busy so as not to feel, keep running so as not to face ourselves, or get high on liquor or drugs so as not to sense our being. Because we are afraid of life, we seek to master and control it. We believe that it is bad or dangerous to be carried away by our emotions. We admire the person who is cool, who acts without feeling. Our hero is James Bond, Secret Agent 007. The emphasis in our culture is upon doing and achieving. The modern individual is committed to being successful, not to being a person. He belongs rightly to the quote-unquote action generation, whose motto is to do more but feel less. So that's the end of the quote. So basically, like, the neurotic individual, according to this definition, is essentially the embodiment of the mind-body problem. It's a person who is split between his body and his mind. So he goes on and he describes this person a little bit more specifically. The neurotic individual is in conflict with himself. Part of his being is trying to overcome another part. His ego is trying to master his body, his rational mind to control his feelings, his will to overcome his fears and anxieties. Though this conflict is in a large part unconscious, its effect is to deplete the person's energy and to destroy his peace of mind. So, I definitely relate to that. I can imagine you probably relate to that to a certain extent. I think it's certainly, I spent years feeling exactly like this, and I think that's why this book was so profound for me, is because especially in the years coming out of college, the years in college and coming out of college, I was entirely this person. I was obsessed with stoicism, right? Which is, as I understood it at that time, an attempt to have no emotion, to just be cool all the time, right? To to be steady, to be unswayed, to be not pushed around by what goes on in your life. And I also got into bodybuilding at that time, right? Which is, now that I think back on it, so much the approach that you're taking essentially in bodybuilding and weightlifting is just like he says, the quote, the ego is trying to master the body, right? You are imposing yourself on your body. You are shaping your body according to how your mind wants it to look, how your ego wants it to look. So that's how I was. I was trying to master my body with my mind. I was trying to control my feelings, and ideally to feel almost nothing at all, or feel no strong emotions, because I idealized that, even in like a philosophical way. I thought it was the ideal way to live. And it drove me into my head, right? It drove me into my head. It made me constantly anxious. I had no peace of mind, certainly not. No peace of mind. Always thinking, always trying to figure out new ways to solve my problems, new ways to, beating myself up for feeling, if I had strong emotions, like not understanding why, and feeling bad about it, and not liking the fact that I did, beating myself up about it, finding new ways to like master and control my body. I also was super into intermittent fasting, right? Which is another form of control over my body, control over my appetite. My hunger doesn't dictate when I'm going to eat. I say when I'm going to eat, right? So then I started pushing fucking my eating back and back and back. So I'd go 16 hours without eating, and then I got even more intense, and then I'd go 20 hours without eating. And then I started eating only once a day, and it was like, that was purely based on me trying to control every possible thing, all the variables, and just have everything be smooth so that there was no variability, there was no surprise in my life. So anyway, back to this book. Hopefully you can relate to some of that. Alexander Lowen, the person who wrote this book, he is a psychotherapist, dead now, and he founded a form of therapy called bioenergetics. So this is a form of what's called somatic psychotherapy, and it has been recently made super popular by Elliott Hulse, if you know him. He is a massive YouTuber. He is a former strongman, teaches people how to become better versions of themselves by getting back in touch with their body, becoming physically stronger versions of themselves, emotionally stronger versions of themselves by getting back in touch with their emotions, learning how to work with and express their emotions. So it was actually through Elliott Hulse that I heard about this book. So just so you know where I found this. So somatic psychotherapy, what does that even mean, right? Well, first of all, let's see. So somatic psychotherapy was first developed by one of Sigmund Freud's students, named Wilhelm Reich. And what Reich realized was that talk therapy, right, which was like the classic idea of like you go into the therapist's office and you lie on the couch and you just talk and talk and talk. And like sometimes for years you do this. And Reich realized that this is, for the most part, not even remotely enough. It doesn't go deep enough to help the person. So what he realized was that this work needed to go much deeper. It needed to work with the person, with the client, at a much deeper level, a much deeper emotional level. Because in his view, this is a quote, the bodily attitude of a person is functionally identical with his psychic attitude. So essentially you could shorten that and say whatever is going on in the person's mind, in the person's body, in the person's emotions, or sorry, not in the person's body, whatever is going on in a person's mind and emotions and his psyche is functionally identical with what's going on in his body, right? So the body and the mind are mirrors of each other. We say there's the body-mind problem, like there's two different things, but if you get rid of that division, they are one and the same. What your body reflects what's going on in your mind, and your mind reflects what's going on in your body. And that's his take on the nature of being a human being. So somatic psychotherapy, that's what that means. So psychotherapy, which brings in the body. That word soma refers to the body, and the technical definition is the body as distinct from the soul, mind, or psyche. So a little bit more about Reich and his relationship to Freud, which is important for understanding where this book is going. So Reich had a major disagreement with Freud about what it meant to be psychologically healthy, and also about how children ought to be adapted to the culture in which they are raised. So I'm going to quote from the book. The author writes, "The central issue in the process of cultural adaptation is the control of sexuality. In Western culture, the practice has been to make the person feel guilty about sexual feelings and sexual practices like masturbation that in no way threaten the peace of the community. When guilt or shame are attached to the feelings, the conflict is internalized and creates a neurotic character." So Freud noticed that all his patients, when they were children, between the ages of whatever, when they were born and when they were around 6 years old, all of them had experienced sexual feelings for the parent of the opposite sex. Not in any kind of horrible, disgusting way. It's not like anything could happen. It's not like the kid wanted to have sex with the parent, literally, but there was some erotic nature to his relationship with the parent. And Freud called this the Oedipus complex. So since these feelings, these sexual feelings on the part of the child towards the opposite parent, these were threatening to the other parent. So if it's the son who feels something for the mom, the father is threatened, generally feels threatened, right? And so if he's aware of these feelings in the child, he shames them, he's aggressive towards him, he threatens the child. He antagonizes the child for these feelings, and the child is then forced to repress his sexuality or else be destroyed by the parent, right? So you're at an early age, and your natural sexual impulses, your natural emotional impulses are being repressed as a survival mechanism. Because if you don't, your parent will destroy you. So but here's the thing, Freud believed that it was necessary for the child to repress these feelings. In his view, to not do so would mean that that child would be unable to adapt to the culture of his family and civilization. Quote, civilization denies the individual full instinctual gratification, unquote. But Freud thought this was necessary for cultural progress. And his role, he thought, as a psychotherapist, was to help people simply function adequately despite that repression, to function while maintaining that repression. And that's where Wilhelm Reich completely differed. So for Reich, he didn't accept that simply functioning under sexual and emotional repression was a sign of health. For Reich, this is a quote now, for Reich, it was not a question of functioning adequately in the culture, but of an individual's ability to give himself fully to sex and to work. That ability allowed the person to experience full satisfaction in his life. To the degree that this ability was lacking, the person was neurotic. He believed that a social system that denied to people the full satisfaction of their instinctual needs was sick and had to be changed. So this is where we get back to the reason why Reich began incorporating the body into his psychotherapy. Again, this is a quote. In his therapeutic work, Reich focused upon sexuality as the key to understanding of character. Every neurotic person had some disturbance in his orgastic response. He could not give in fully to the involuntary pleasurable convulsions of the orgasm. He was afraid of the overwhelming feeling of total orgasm. So, to rephrase that, the person is afraid of letting go to orgasm, letting go to completely experience like the height of sexual pleasure, because that is completely a state in which you are not in control anymore, right? You have to let go to experience that. So to get over this, to get to a place where you can experience that full orgastic response, as he puts it, required more than just talk therapy. It required an exploration and a release of the body, the physical and the muscular tensions that the person had developed over their life as a result of repressing their sexuality and their emotions. He says, breathing, motility, and the involuntary pleasurable movements of orgasm were markedly restricted in the neurotic individual by chronic muscular tensions. And Reich literally referred to these tensions as armoring, like a fucking knight's suit of armor. Your emotional repression creates muscular tension, which acts as armor. So, the author of this book, Fear of Life, was a student of Reich. He was a client of Reich for a while. And so he then took it and he developed Wilhelm Reich's work into something even deeper, and he called it bioenergetics. So he describes bioenergetics like this. Bioenergetics provides a systematic understanding of character structure on both the psychic and somatic levels. That understanding enables one to read the person's character and emotional problems from the expression of his body. It makes it possible also to imagine the history of the person, since his life experiences are structured in his body. The information gained from this reading of the language of the body is integrated into the analytic process. It employs many active bodily techniques and exercises to help a person strengthen his standing, increase his energy, enlarge and deepen his self-perception, and further his self-expression. In bioenergetic analysis, the bodywork is coordinated with the analytic process, making this therapeutic modality a combined body-mind approach to emotional problems. So, one other thing that this book deals with a ton is the topic of the ego. The author says that it was the development of the ego that gave rise to modern man and modern society. Quote, "This development is associated with the acquisition of knowledge and the gaining of power over nature. Man is part of nature like any other animal, fully subject to her laws, but he is also above nature, acting upon and controlling her. He does the same with his own nature. Part of his personality, the ego, turns against the animal part, the body. The antithesis between ego and body produces a dynamic tension that furthers the growth of culture, but it also contains a destructive potential. When the ego and the body pull apart to the point where there is no contact between them, the result is a psychotic break." So then he goes on to ask, what is the fate of modern man? He then continues, "If the story of Oedipus can serve as a prophecy, it is a prophecy of achieving the success and power one seeks, only to find one's world coming apart or breaking down. The collapse of their world, the collapse of the modern man's world, is the impoverishment of their inner or emotional lives. Having committed themselves to success and power, they have little else to live for." So then he goes on to say, "The challenge is to reconcile the antithetical aspects in his personality. On the body level, he is an animal. On the ego level, a would-be god. The fate of the animal is death, which the ego, in its godlike aspirations, is trying to avoid. But in trying to avoid this fate, man creates an even worse one, namely, to live in fear." And that's basically where the introduction ends. This video obviously went on a bit longer than I was expecting, but I hope it gives you a good sense of what this book is about. I do plan on making another video for all the rest of the chapters because I liked this book so much and I want to share it with you, and I want to challenge myself with teaching and sharing what it is I've learned from it rather than just putting it aside and moving on. So expect there to be more videos on this topic for sure. And until next time, hope this video was interesting and valuable for you.